Hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge, back once again with another instalment of my Ultimate New 52 Reading Guide video series. To provide a bit of background here, I have over the last few years read the entire DC New 52. That's 3,646 single issues. I've used that read through to create the internet's most comprehensive reading guide in the form of a map and infographic, and this series is a result of that. Today's video is video 5.2, the second in our series that dives into the Bat family continued. So before we go any further, I will stress that even if you think you know what the New 52 is, or even if you only want to read one specific character like Batman, you still need to watch the introduction video in this series, because that's the video where I introduce a lot of the jargon and principles and themes that I'll refer to constantly throughout this series. Things like the convergence line, type P readers, volumes with big V's and so on. So if you're finding all that quite confusing, then what you need to do is go to the description below and check out the introduction video before you go any further. But with all that said, with no further ado, here is the DC New 52 Ultimate Reading Guide. So today's episode is one of the ones that, again, I suspect will get a lot of interest because it's part of the Bat family, and this is 5.2, the Bat family continued. If you're following along at home, if you zoom in the middle, what we have here is the Flashpoint central event, and the Bat family is everything to the north in the black circles and so on. Now, the main Batman series by Snyder and Capullo is on the thick black line in the centre, and I covered that in the last episode. So today we're going to actually go here slightly to the west. The first line over is actually Detective Comics, and that's what we're going to be starting on today. So with Detective Comics, this series is from 2011 to 2016. It was written and drawn by Tony Daniel initially, and this is volume 2 of Detective Comics. That's a volume with a big V, as the original volume of Detective Comics ran from 1937 and lasted 881 issues right up until 2011. Then, after Flashpoint, it got restarted as volume 2 of Detective Comics, as volume with a big V, and so here we go with a new issue 1. One thing that's really important before we dive into this, you don't need to read this to understand the main Batman run by Scott Snyder, but it does help to understand the later collections here if you read Snyder's run first. And generally, I would always say read the central series that I have on the thicker black line first, and that can serve as your anchor point for the wider family of comics. So what we have here, we're going to dive into the trade collections, or volumes with a small V, and this is volume 1 called Faces of Death. It collects issues 1 to 7 and is quite an unremarkable story, but this volume is actually quite famous, or notorious if you prefer, as this is the first appearance of the New 52's version of the Joker, well before he turned up in Batman itself. However, he's only in issue 1, and that's where something really dramatic and pivotal happens involving Joker's face. Having said that, I will stress, you don't need to read this to understand the main Scott Snyder Batman run if you're reading that first. So remember, be a type J reader, not a type P reader. If you are a type P reader, then you need to go online and get a reading order or Reddit or something. If we continue up this line, we will find here the next volume of Detective Comics is called Scare Tactics. It contains issues 8 to 12, issue 0 and annual 1. Issue 9 is part of the crossover Night of the Owls, which, as we've already seen, covers all these issues and more. And like all these volumes, it's absolutely fine where it is. Assuming you read Snyder's Batman first, you can read this volume as it is. It's okay. The Night of the Owls crossover won't confuse you. Let's continue scrolling up, and here we've got volume 3 of Detective Comics. This is called Emperor Penguin, and it contains issues 13 to 18. Issue 15 is from the crossover Death of the Family, which I discussed last time, but it's non-essential reading for that crossover and also quite mediocre. It's at this time that the writing duties for this series are taken over by Layman and Fabok. On that note, if we continue scrolling upwards, we have here volume 4, which is called The Wrath. It's a pretty self-contained collection, comprising issues 19 to 24 and annual 2 of Detective Comics. I enjoyed the art and the writing. It's a bit formulaic, but it's actually pretty good and worth getting. I picked it up in a hardcover. Now it's going to get a little bit confusing, so stay focused. If we scroll up, we will have this volume here, which is called Gothtopia. It's volume 5 of Detective Comics. Now, this contains issues 25 to 29. This means this book is largely subsumed by crossover events, which you are well aware is not something I'm a fan of. This has both issue 25, which is part of the crossover called 0 Year we talked about last time, More importantly, it also contains issues 28 to 29, which are from crossover 4, which is called Gothtopia. Now, you'll remember that Zero Year, as a crossover event, has its own standalone event book, which I covered last video. Now, Gothtopia, although it's both the name of this trade collection and the name of an event, it doesn't have an event book of itself. If you remember, this is the crossover I never mentioned in the video last time, as it doesn't intersect with the Snyder Batman series, which you can see here to the right, at all. Yes, I always know I say that if it's not its own standalone book, I won't call them crossovers, I'll call them tie-ins. But even though this isn't in a standalone book, I think that's really a mistake by DC, and I can't in all good faith call this a simple event with the tie-ins, because the full event contains, as I'll show you here in this reading order, as well as the 2 Detective Comics issues, it includes a Batwing issue, a Batgirl issue, 2 Birds of Prey issues, 2 Catwoman issues. In other words, the majority of the tie-ins, 75% of them, are outside Volume 5 Gothtopia. And frankly, DC have made some kind of strange mistake by not releasing a standalone event book here. They should have an event book here. I'm going to pretend that one does exist. If you're reading it in single issues like I did, the single issue that I've just shown you are the ones that you need to read. Anyway, Gothtopia got a fair bit of hype, and I won't spoil it for you, but it's actually not very good. Anyway, we're going to continue scrolling upwards. After this volume, Layman and Fabok left to write Batman Eternal, which, don't worry, we're going to go into in just a moment. And they were replaced by Buccellato and Manapul, who were just moving off the Flash series at the time. We're going to cover Flash in video 6.1. We also were interested to know that issue 27, which is also collected in that volume 5, is a sort of anniversary issue for the 75th anniversary of Batman, and it had lots of separate stories in it by a range of writers and artists. That's why it was collected across this entire map in various forms. But anyway, right now we're looking at volume 6, which is called Icarus. It contains issues 30 to 34 and annual 3. Continuing up, we're going to get to volume 7, which is called Anarchy. That's A-N-A-R-K-Y, so Anarchy with a K. If you know a bit about the pre-New 52 Batman, you'll get why it's named that and where that's come from. If not, don't worry about it. It contains single issues 35 to 40, and the Future's End one-shot for Detective Comics, and an Endgame tie-in one-shot. Now, again, just to scroll out, I did show you last time that around Endgame, I have arranged all these volumes, so things with Endgame tie-ins are all next to each other. This Endgame one-shot in Detective Comics here, Anarchy, is collected in the Endgame standalone event book, but it's not very good. It's just not very good, so don't really worry about it. We're going to continue following this line up. We're going to go past the Convergence line, where things tend to get a little bit strange in this era of DC, as you may have gathered. And here we have volume 8, which is called Blood of Heroes. This takes place after the Convergence line, as I said, and that means it features Bunny Batman, as the fans took to calling him. It contains issues 41 to 47, and is kind of okay. And then scrolling up right at the end there, we have volume 9, called Gordon at War. This contains issues 48 to 52, and that comprises the end of that run. Just going to pull back a bit to give you guys some perspective as to where that fits. And that was the line we were tracking there, the one directly to the left of the main central Batman line. Okay, that was Detective Comics Volume 2 from 2011 to 2016. Now, I did mention, obviously, Batman Eternal, and so what I'm going to do is actually jump into that here. Batman Eternal can be found here. So just to the left of Batman Detective Comics, just to the west of that, but past the Forever Evil line and before the Convergence line. So, I've got Batman Eternal shown here. This comic ran between 2014 to 15. Now, something to be aware of, this was released weekly between April 2014 and April 2015. That meant it ran for a total of 52 issues, with a couple of idiosyncrasies, which I'll mention now, of course. It was written by a half dozen different writers, including Scott Snyder and James Tynion IV. Now, James Tynion IV is a name you should remember, as during the New 52 era, DC spent a lot of time training him up to become a major new writer for the Rebirth era. So, Batman Eternal was actually released in 3 volumes. They're all paperback, so there's no hardcovers here, I'm afraid. but an omnibus is now available. I'll add a link in the description to a good review of the omnibus done elsewhere on YouTube. As it is, I'm just going to go through the 3 collections you can get in paperback here. What we're looking at now is volume 1, that contains issues 1 to 21. Up here we've got volume 2 of it, which contains issues 22 to 34. These volumes don't have names, by the way. And then right at the end, it ends with volume 3, which has got this artwork on the cover there, and that contains issues 35 to 52. However, this is the important thing, it also contains an issue of Batman. To be precise, it contains issue 28 of Batman, which is set directly between Batman Eternal issue 42 and 43. Make a note of that if you're reading it in singles. So overall, would I recommend Batman Eternal? Yeah, it's well worth a read, and it was shaping up to be a really, really good story. But right at the 11th hour, it felt like DC lost their nerve and swerved a really interesting plot back to tiled old cliches in literally the very last issue. As such, the only thing that comes out of it that matters is the introduction of the character Spoiler and the introduction of Alfred's daughter to help him out in the Batcave. Neither are huge revelations, and if you're a Type J reader, you won't really be too confused if you miss this series. You'll just notice new characters elsewhere, and you'll just kind of be like, okay, I guess this is what's happened here. You'll notice that although this is the last of Batman Eternal, there is a line that comes out of it, and that's because Batman Eternal spawned, just after the Convergence line, a pretty direct sequel, which is Batman and Robin Eternal. This ran from 2015 to 2016. Again, written by a medley of talent and released on a weekly schedule from October 2015 to 2016, this series only lasted half as long. It lasted for 26 issues. It's available in 2 collected volumes. They're both in paperback, so again, we have no option of getting a hardcover here. They don't have names, just volumes. So this is volume 1, collects issues 1 to 12. And as we scroll up, volume 2 contains issues 13 to 26. So would I recommend reading Batman and Robin Eternal? Well, you can if you want, but I found it largely forgettable, barring one interesting and evocative conversation between Bruce and Damian in issue 22. I suspect an omnibus will be released at some point. Batman Eternal has just been released, so it does make sense. It's worth pointing out that it's technically set after volume 7 of the main Batman series, and so set after the events of Endgame, and Endgame, remember, is down here. But I'm kind of assuming everyone who's interested in Batman will have read the Batman series first before looking at things like the Eternal spin-offs, and you'll be fine doing that. Okay, let's have a look out, and we've got a bit of time left today, so I'm going to quickly throw in one other series. What I'm going to look at here is, if you go to the right or the east of the Batman line, and we're going to skip Nightwing, Batman and Robin and Red Hood and the Outlaws for now, we're going to go straight over to Batman The Dark Knight. Now, before we jump into this, we need a brief history lesson, but don't worry, I'm keeping it brief, and trust me, you do need to know this. In January 2011, so before the Flashpoint event and about 7 or 8 months before the start of the New 52, DC hired David Finch to write a Batman story called Batman The Dark Knight. He did so, and this is collected as Batman The Dark Knight here. It's sometimes given the subtitle Golden Dawn. It's available as an oversized hardcover, so this is substantially taller than the New 52 hardcovers and exactly the same height and depth as an omnibus. And it only ran for 5 issues. So this story ran parallel to the first volume of Batman Incorporated. That's going to sound confusing right now, and I understand that. Don't worry, make a note, remember it, we're going to discuss it in the next video. Now, anyway, as I said, it ran for 5 issues, and then we had Flashpoint. In the aftermath of that, DC asked Finch to continue writing, and so we got the New 52 Dark Knight series, or rather, Batman The Dark Knight Volume 2, where we're talking volume with a big V as it started from a new issue 1. So in other words, volume with a big V 1 only ran for 5 issues, and that's the picture we're looking at now. And now we're going to move back to the map, and here's volume with a big V 2. I think it's worth knowing that bit of background, as otherwise you can easily see the original pre-New 52 volume, Golden Dawn, in a local comic shop somewhere and get really confused where it fits in. I know I got confused until I eventually worked it out, so I just thought I'd clarify things here. So this first volume here is called Night Terrors, contains issues 1 to 9. The next volume here is called Cycle of Violence and contains issues 10 to 15 and issue 0. Following this along, I should point out that Cycle of Violence all contain a Night of the Owls crossover, but it's not very interesting. Here we are. This is volume 3, Mad, which contains 16 to 21 and Annual 1. And then if we continue right to the end of this line, the very last one we have is volume 4, Clay, which continues issues 22 to 29. And that ends just there before the Convergence line. Oh no, sorry, just before the New 50, the Forever Evil line. Sorry, I forgot how short this series is. Other than the single issue of The Dark Knight that's part of crossover 1, Night of the Owls, and that's in the early volumes, then this series has nothing to do with anything else in the Bat universe. It doesn't cross over with anything else, and it's totally standalone. In fact, the series is much more about diving into the horror and psychological aspect of Batman's enemies, with entire volumes devoted to the Mad Hatter, that was the third one, and Clayface, that's the fourth one. So I've been kind of on the shelf about whether I should pick up the hardcovers, but then I found them cheap in a local shop called The Works, which we have here in the UK, and I caved in and picked them up. So that's the end of this video series. A bit of a deep dive into some more New 52 Batman. You can see we're making progress, but there's still a lot more to cover, and there's going to be at least 4 more videos covering the rest of the volumes you can see there. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, and share more widely. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on the New 52. If you have any questions, just drop them in the comments below, or tweet me at IamThomasJudge. And as always, these videos are only possible thanks to supporting this channel by heading over to Amazon.com and picking up the first episode of my prose novel, No Gods or Kings, which is available for less than $1 and is over 200 pages long, so definitely value for money. It's a series of interviews from a future where superpowers are real, and the entire world has changed dramatically as a result. If you have Kindle Unlimited, the first volume is already completely free. For those of you that are interested in downloading this map and infographic I've created for this video, it's also available on my website, which is nogodsorkings.com, which is in the description below. So whilst you're there, why not pick up the first book and support the channel. Until next time, stay classy.